Good evening, it is 5 p.m. and this is Today in YGK on CFRC 101.9 FM, broadcasting from Lower Carruthers Hall on Queen's Campus in Kingston, Ontario. Today in YGK is brought to you by your CFRC News Collective, Ara McCauley, Jessie Bell, and Jenny Hinch. CFRC's news programming is made possible by the generous support of the Community Radio Fund of Canada, the Local Journalism Initiative, Queen's University Career Services, and for our podcasts, Smith Engineering at Queen's University. I'm CFRC's broadcast journalist Ara McCauley, and here are your local news headlines. Since the sudden announcement about its planned integration with Fleming College on April 10, 2026, faculty and staff at St. Lawrence College in Kingston, Brockville, and Cornwall have been seeking answers about future plans for the campuses and their jobs. In May, Ontario Public Service Employees Union, OPSU Local 417, reported that 28 full-time faculty members across the 3 SLC campuses had lost their jobs at the college, while an additional 16 faculty were involuntarily transferred to other programs, some at other SLC sites, raising further concerns about the college's plans for its workers. While SLC and Fleming College have said in public statements that they plan to integrate but continue to run under their existing names and brands, OPSU Locals 417 and 418 are raising the alarm over leaked audit documents that reference the intended dissolution of St. Lawrence College on March 31, 2027, stating that it is expected that the college will be dissolved once its assets are transferred to a new college. The union has expressed its concerns about the lack of transparency about what will happen when the college is no longer operating independently, and criticized the college for excluding its employees from the decision-making process. CFRC spoke to Amanda Shaw, president of OPSU Local 418, representing support staff across the college, about the union's concerns.
I wanted to speak to you today in relation to a press release that OPSU 417 and 418 recently put out, and some of the main concerns that you have related to the integration, as they're calling it, of St. Lawrence College and Fleming College, and what you're calling on leadership to do.
Our biggest issue at the moment is the lack of transparency. At the onset, when it was announced, the way that the media release read was that frameworks had been provided to both boards of governors and that the boards had approved, in theory, obviously assuming that the Ontario legislation is modified to allow the merger, because at the moment the legislation doesn't really speak to that kind of a merger, and there's some details that they have to work out that way. However, now with the business plans that have come out, one document speaks to the dissolution of St. Lawrence College as it stands, and the other one speaks about it in a merger. So it's mixed messages, really. And what we're hoping for as the union representatives for the members at both institutions is a seat at the tables that are discussing things that will impact our membership. So jobs and services and program mixes between the two institutions and all of those pieces. In some conversations, it's been presented as a merger, much like when hospitals merge, where each institution maintains its own brand identity and they all just function under one umbrella. But then when you read things in the audited financial statements that say St. Lawrence College will be dissolved, then that flies in the face of that comment. But we haven't received anything to date. We've received no information and haven't been invited to sit at any of those tables. We were told in an email that union representatives would be brought into the mix when appropriate and that it was preliminary at the moment. But when you're reading in audited financial statements that St. Lawrence College may be dissolved, then it seems like we need to do that sooner. Our collective agreements all have language called Joint Transitional Committee language, which speaks to the forming of a committee with parties from both institutions to sit at a table to discuss all of these different pieces. What the staff effects will be, jobs and PDFs and services and all of those pieces. But the college hasn't shown any movement so far to actually get that committee up and running, and hasn't provided any information either. So what we're hoping for is more information, seats at the table, to make sure that we're helping our members through this very much transitional time.
SLC has not updated its page about the integration since the April statement, and while they outline the potential benefits of the integration for the college, including expanded opportunities for student learning, improved alignment with regional labor market and employer needs, and strengthened long-term sustainability and institutional capacity, reference to SLC workers is limited to promising current students that, quote, faculty and staff will continue to support students and deliver programming across both colleges.
If you look at the statement on St. Lawrence College's website, there's a lot of talk about what's being done for the students, but there isn't really talk about staff and faculty in there.
Right, and I don't think that that nearly addresses our concerns or questions regarding staffing and what that will look like. Acknowledging that if it is in preliminary stages, that maybe they can't yet, but we would hope for the ability to have open and honest and transparent discussions about these pieces as we go through the process, not until it's too late for us to be able to have any input or do anything about it. St. Lawrence College just laid off a significant number of faculty. Support staff were hit significantly last year. Fleming has been going through a lot of layoffs as well, off and on since the pandemic. So we are all very much worried about the staffing levels and the impacts to staff, because when there are impacts to staff and faculty, there are impacts to students. We can try to make that look as pretty as we want to. There are impacts to students when the colleges are not staffed appropriately and when we don't have enough faculty to teach those courses as well. We are concerned about our students, but we're also concerned about our communities, because both St. Lawrence College and Fleming have campuses in smaller communities as well as their main campuses. I believe Fleming has a campus in Halliburton and Lindsay in addition to Peterborough, which is their main campus, and we obviously have our main campus in Kingston with Brockville and Cornwall campuses. So we also think about those communities because our colleges were designed to serve those communities, to meet the industry need, and to make sure that employers in the area have graduates who are career ready and can do that work and who can boost the economy in those areas. So it isn't as simple as us worrying about our jobs and our members. We're worried about the communities that we serve, the students that we served, and the impacts on Ontario as well from those cuts. Because I don't believe that this will be the first merger. I believe that this is them getting a framework.
The City of Kingston had recently put out, they're working on a student housing strategy, and part of the recognition of that is the significant number of Queen's and St. Lawrence College students that they're expecting to come in. So obviously that informs how Kingston plans to build, how it plans to fill, as you say, its labor market and what the structure of the community is. And when you see significant potential changes, it does make one wonder.
Absolutely, and you worry about people who can't afford to go away to school. Community colleges were created to serve that need, to give people a viable educational option in their community so that they could not only afford to go to school, stay home, but also kind of reinvest their talents within that community as well and help those communities to grow and to prosper and to keep going. Realistically, in the absence of information, it makes all of that come into question about what those priorities are.
As of the time of this release, you said that there are multiple calls that you've put forward to leadership that have gone unanswered. I wonder if you could speak to what you're asking for and if you have any updates on those.
So at the initial onset, we had asked just basically for information about how the decision came to light, and we didn't really get anything because we were told right as the press release went out to media. I got notified after the email went out to the membership, so no ability to ask questions or frame anything at that point. Then, since at the time it indicated in press releases that they presented frameworks to the board, we'd asked for copies of the frameworks and anything that had been used in discussion to get them up to that point. That request actually went completely unanswered up until now. We have filed grievances through our locals. We're not supposed to speak about those at this point. We've had responses through, but nothing that makes anything clear. So part of our concern stems from the fact that it actually said in St. Lawrence College's efficiency audit report that it recommended a merger with another institution. And at the time we were told not to worry because it was an if the financial position didn't change. And now here we are. We're not even 12 months later. And I think it was about 6 months later when they announced that we were merging with Fleming. And there are some other things in that efficiency audit report that are cause for concern. It also recommends the closure of the Cornwall and Brockville campuses by 2028, unless something changes with the financial position. So it's got everybody kind of nervous, right? Because there really isn't a lot of conversation. We just got an update recently and it just kind of said that work continues, and again, we've not yet been invited to those tables. We did have a meeting with management shortly after to ask some questions, but the people that we met with were not able to provide any answers.
According to a post on St. Lawrence College's website, SLC and Fleming College have agreed to integrate as equals, which they argue will create greater opportunities for students, strengthen institutional capacity and sustainability, and allow for even better alignment with labor force demand.
There seems a mix between saying integration and merger messaging, saying that St. Lawrence College and Fleming will continue to operate as their own entities. However, there's also the new college, each letter capitalized, and the discussion that it will now be overseen by one president. I can imagine that adds to the questions and concern.
It does, absolutely. We understand that the college system is in kind of a crisis at the moment and has been for a couple of years now since the international student visa caps were reduced. But when we're talking the context of this merger or integration, and you're right, the language changes. It changes between integration or merger, and it kind of depends on what you're reading at the time, which language is being used. And then when you're reading, like I said, the audited financial statements and reading the words dissolved, then it just sends warning flags up about what the real intent is. And because a merger of this type hasn't been done before, it's also new territory. So there isn't even like a past practice to be able to look at and kind of try to map it out for yourself or forecast.
So unfortunately, in our conversation today, there's not going to be a lot of answers, but certainly an important story and one that we'll continue to follow. And please do keep us updated if you hear back. Hopefully now with people picking up this story, then it might encourage some further dialogue.
Absolutely. And that was our hope. Our hope was some further dialogue, some more information, getting that joint transitional committee up and running, so that we can have a seat at the table when we're discussing things that could negatively impact not just our students, but our faculty and support staff as well.
While SLC promises that campus operations will continue as usual while the next phase of integration planning gets underway, what will happen on April 1st, 2027 has not been made public. The new college, as it's currently being titled, will have a single management team. Glenn Volbrett, current president and CEO of St. Lawrence College, is set to serve as the initial president and CEO, and Teresa Knott, interim president of Fleming College, will serve as the initial associate president and chief academic officer. That wraps up your headlines for this evening. Next up is Jessie Bell with your CFRC Sports Desk.
This is part 4 of our OUA football season preview, brought to you by CFRC Power Plays. Today we are looking at the 2025 Carleton Ravens. One of the most bizarre, exciting, and infuriating seasons in recent memory, the 2025 Ravens were consistent with one thing, and that was being inconsistent. They didn't know who would start at quarterback from week to week. Heck, they didn't know who would be at quarterback from drive to drive sometimes. Their defense would show flashes of something great one moment and totally implode in the next. They lost games they should have won, Toronto and McMaster, and won games they should have lost, York and Ottawa. The Ravens ended up with a very respectable 3-5 record, but missed the playoffs by 2 points, falling short to McMaster in Week 9, 41-39. We at least got some closure about the quarterback situation by the end of the year, as Elijah Barnes emerged as a legitimate starting caliber player with a very fun skill set. Let's take a look at their 2025 stats. They were 5th in points for on offense with 215. It's about 27 points per game. They were 6th in yards per game with 432, giving them about 3,312 yards. They were 2nd in total passing yards with 2666, which is about 333 pass yards per game. They were 11th, so last place in total rushing yards with 789, only team to average under 100 per game. They loved to throw the football, which is good, because they had to. Their defense was 10th in points allowed, giving up 320. That's 40 points per game. They were last in passing yards allowed per game with 365.6. They were 10th in rushing yards allowed per game with 185.1, putting them in last place for total yards allowed per game with an astonishing 550.8. Their defense did not look good for most of the season, but they were great when it mattered most for them, which was the Panda Bowl. Their point differential, minus 105, that's 8th in the conference, which makes sense because that's where they finished. Over the last 5 seasons, their record has been, say it with me, inconsistent. 2-4 in 2021, 5-3 in 2022, 4-4 in 2023, 2-6 in 2024, and 3-5 in 2025. So all over the map here. In 2026, I've got them kind of right towards the middle. I am a little concerned. They have lost a lot of their key guys from the post-COVID era. Wide receiver Tristan Reddy, great player, he's in the CFL. Kicker Brandon Forcier is gone. I think he had a fantastic career for Carleton. They've lost Nathan Clark, their defensive lineman. They've lost linebacker Mikhail Alleg. And it looks like longtime quarterback Tristan Lefebvre is gone, or at very least, no longer the man under center for the Ravens. That being said, there is still some potency left in this passing attack with the great dual-threat quarterback Elijah Barnes, ready, I think, to take that next step, and star wide receiver Frederick Hashi, back for his 5th and final year. I think Carleton has a pretty middling schedule. Not too bad, not too easy. They've got York on the road in week 1, Waterloo at home in week 2. They play the Griffins in Guelph before hosting the Yates Cup champs, Queens Gales, for the first time since 2021. The Panda Bowl is in week 5, so they're playing Ottawa. Then they have 2 killer games against Western and Laurier before finishing out with the Blues at home. Looking at this schedule, I've got the Ravens going 4-4 with victories over York, Waterloo, Ottawa, and Toronto. I think those other 4 games are pretty scary for the Ravens, but if they can at least look competitive in these contests, it'll go a long way towards building momentum for a potential playoff run. I think 4 wins is this team's ceiling and 2 is their floor. I think they'll finish in the middle to lower middle half of the OUA. That is a wrap for your sports report. Coming up next, I've got your weather and traffic. This is your Environment Canada weather report for the Kingston region. Monday, July 27th, daytime high of 23 degrees, feeling closer to 27 with the humidity, UV index of 6. There is a 55% chance of precipitation, including a thunderstorm risk in the afternoon. Tuesday, July 28th, 22 degrees is your high, another humid day, feeling closer to 27 here in the city of Kingston. UV index of 6 with an 88% chance of precipitation throughout the day and a risk of a thunderstorm in the afternoon. Wednesday, July 29th, 23 is your high with more rain in the forecast and 84% chance of precipitation, dropping down to 16 overnight. Thursday, July 30th, 24 degrees with cloudy conditions and a 55% chance of precipitation is your forecast, dropping down to 16 overnight. Friday, July 31st, the last day of the month of July, looks like a beautiful one here in Kingston. 27 is your high, feeling closer to 32 with lots of bright sunshine, UV index of 9. Saturday, August 1st, 26 degrees is your high, with a mix of sun and cloud. Looks like a beautiful day to take in the Princess Street Promenade. Make sure you stop off and say hello to CFRC. We will have a booth there on Princess Street. Sunday, August 2nd, 25 degrees is your high with a 60% chance of precipitation, including a thunderstorm risk in the afternoon. And kicking off the start of next week, Monday, August 3rd, 26 is your high with a 55% chance of rain. This is Jesse Bell with your City of Kingston traffic report. Cranbrook Street from Lakeview Avenue to Days Road is closed for pedestrian improvements. The intersection of Toronto Street and Park Street will be closed daily for the installation of an all-way stop by a city contractor. Earl Street from Collingwood Street to Victoria will be closed July 27th to July 30th for manhole repair. Princess Street from Bagot to Ontario will be closed all day on Saturday, August 1st for the Princess Street Promenade. Wright Crescent at Palace Road is closed for a contractor to complete roadway repairs, pedestrian safety and access improvements, and traffic calming features on Wright Crescent. Norman Rogers Drive from Sir John A. Macdonald Boulevard to Van Order Drive is closed to through traffic to facilitate roadway rehabilitation and configuration improvements. This work will improve road condition, accessibility, and safety for all road users, including students, families, and local residents. The City of Kingston and Utilities Kingston are still in the midst of a major reconstruction of Princess Street. This infrastructure project provides upgrades to underground and above-ground utilities, as well as improvements to enhance safety and comfort for pedestrians and cyclists. Berry Street to Queen is still closed for construction-related activity at 283 Queen Street. Aberdeen Street from Johnson to William is closed to accommodate construction activity and staging. And Bath Road from Sir John A. Macdonald Boulevard to Portsmouth Ave. Expect delays for the installation of intersection pedestrian signals. The city is installing IPS at several locations to make it easier and safer for pedestrians to cross busy roads. Signals are being installed at Bath Road and LaFleur Park, Concession Street at Kings Court Avenue, and Stephen Street at Patrick Street. That's it for sports, weather, and traffic. Coming up next, we have Genevieve Hinch with CFRC's concert and events calendar.
Hello, Kingston, and welcome back to CFRC 101.9 FM. Broadcasting from Kingston, Ontario, I'm CFRC's Community News and Arts Coordinator, Jenny, and this is your weekly events and concerts calendar brought to you by Flying V Productions. Whether you're looking for live music, community events, workshops, markets, or family-friendly fun, there is lots happening around Kingston this week, so let's get into it. Starting off Monday, Cafe Franglais returns over lunch at Sydenham Street, followed by the unveiling of the Bidabon, Queen's new mixed reality artwork, and Craft and Create at the Central Branch Library. Live music includes Jazz Mondays with Dave Barton at the RCHA Club, Nolan Hubbard at the Cove Inn, and One Ground, One Sound at the Spear. On Tuesday, stay active with chair fitness before taking part in an ASL workshop, and then head to Springer Market Square for Salsa in the Square. Live music includes Tom Savage's Tuesday Happy Hour Jam at the RCHA Club, Lucas O at the Cove Inn, and Tony Bonney and Kenny Paws at the Turnanog. Wednesday features the United Way's Mega Bike Community Ride, a lunch and learned at Cultivate Arts Commons, silent reading, the Solar Punk Writing Lab, games in the Square, and a free screening of Guardians of the Galaxy in Springer Market Square. Music includes Sam Wood at the Bank Gastro Bar, Sean McCullen at the Cove Inn, Christopher Jackson at Creekside Bar, Taylor Donaldson Orchestra at the City Hall Amphitheater, plus open mic nights at both Timeout Bar and Hotel Wolf Island. On Thursday, browse the Kingston Public Market, enjoy stories in the square, and bring your own craft, or an Indigenous beadwork workshop at the Central Library. You can also catch a free screening of The Wedding Singer, or head to the Queen's Family Night at Elbow Lake. Live music includes Will Spence, Taryn McKenna, and Vince DeBeal, David James Allen and the Growing Machine, Barn Swallow, J.S. Miller, and the Hideaways. Friday includes meditation in the gallery, Spanish conversation sessions, and Kicking It Country at City Hall Amphitheater. Music highlights include King of Swingers at the Cove Inn, Courtney Kane, Three's Company at Spearhead Brewing, Kristen St. Pierre at the Waterfront Concert Series, Christopher Jackson, Painted Moons, Bon Evans, and Chump Worsley at the Toucan. Heading into Saturday, don't miss the Princess Street Promenade, the Montreal Street Vintage Market, and the Mini Market Series, Chef Dimon's Saturday Sessions, and the KFPL's Emancipation Day programming. Live music includes Jeff Callery at the Cove Inn, the Blue Skies Music Festival, the Waterfront Concert Series, Indian Classic Music at the Spear, and Dr. Bombay at the Turnanog. Wrapping things up Sunday, the Memorial Center Farmers Market returns alongside yoga in Battery Park and jazz brunch at Black Dog. Music includes Scotty and the Naughties, John McLurg, Head Over Heels at the Cove Inn, and the Blue Skies Music Festival Day 2. That is your weekly events and concerts calendar for July 27th through August 2nd. For more information on any of these events, visit the CFRC website and keep it locked right here on CFRC 101.9 FM. The events calendar is brought to you by Flying V Productions, bringing live theater, comedy, and unforgettable entertainment to audiences across Kingston. I'm Jenny. Thanks for listening and have a great week, Kingston.
Thank you for tuning in to CFRC's local news programming. To revisit episodes of Today in YGK and listen on the go, be sure to head to our podcast network at podcast.cfrc.ca. Today in YGK is brought to you by the generous support of the Community Radio Fund of Canada, the Local Journalism Initiative, Queen's University Career Services, and for our podcast, Smith Engineering at Queen's University. Be sure to stay tuned for more CFRC programming coming up next.
Thank you for listening to this podcast produced at CFRC 101.9 FM at Queen's University, situated on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples and brought to you by the generous support of the Faculty of Engineering and Applied Science.